Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of the Made for Business podcast. I'm Sterling Jakewith, and this is the intro episode where I tell my story. I'm going to share my story. You can skip this episode if you don't want to know any of the details. If you're interested in building your own business, that is what the entire rest of the podcast is going to be about. But I wanted to take one episode that I could refer to later that explains how I got here, what my process was for becoming the businesswoman that I am today, and how I built the confidence in really knowing that this is exactly where God wants me to be. So, from a very young age, when I was 11, I wrote my first business plan. We made a huckleberry pie at my grandmother's, and she said, "Oh, this is very special. You can't buy huckleberry pies in the store." And we had just gone and picked these huckleberries, and my grandmother made this pie, and I thought, ooh, I bet I could make a lot of money if I made my brother pick huckleberries in the forest, and then we made these pies and we could sell them for a lot of money. So even at 11, I was aware of entrepreneurship and supply and demand, and that huckleberry pies were exclusive. And I made a logo, and my dad helped me work out the math of how much it would all cost. And I don't think, you guys, I made a single pie except for that one that we made that day. I actually don't love baking. It's not my favorite thing, but I really enjoyed the process of writing the business plan for high-rise pies. It was really fun, and that was my first kind of foray into entrepreneurship. And then when I went to high school, there is a club called DECA. And what it is it's a business club where students come and they learn about marketing or sales or writing business plans. So there are all these different tracks that you can take, but I chose to take the one for writing business plans. And so I started practicing writing business plans. And what you would do is you would write one and then you would submit it in a competition. And you would compete locally and then at the state level and then at the national level. And I was really good at this. I was really good at learning about a certain industry and creating a company and writing a business plan about it. And so the very first business plan that I wrote for that competition was called Rent Picks. And this was way before Craigslist existed. And I wrote a business plan for creating a website that took pictures of rental properties. And I would find like a local kid on the ground to take pictures, and we'd load those pictures up on a website. And it was basically making renting easier than looking through the newspapers. And this must have been, I don't know, the early 1990s. And so that business plan did very well, and I ended up competing at the national level for that one. And then the next one I wrote was for the Starlight Drive-In. And I thought we should resurrect drive-in movie theaters, and I will pair it with a pizza by the slice drive-through restaurant during the day. So they'll do coffee in the morning, pizza in the afternoon and the evening, and then a drive-through movie theater, a drive-in movie theater after that. So the Starlight Drive-In also did very well, and I competed at the national level for that. And I was also at the time learning about web design. And so when I was a junior, I was a junior in high school, I learned enough to start coding very simple things. Like I could make a web page and turn things different colors. And, back then you're kind of hand coding everything. There were no special WordPress sites or Wix sites back then. And I thought, you know what, I could really make money doing this. And so there was actually a boy in my class who was much better at it than I was. And I said, listen, I'll go sell us some websites if you think you can build them. And we were 17. And I went out and sold $600 sites, $1,200 sites. And, to someone who was young, that was a lot of money. This is a lot more money than you can make babysitting or, working at a coffee stand. And so we started making money, making these little sites. We did one for a caterer. We did one for a soccer club. And people loved them, and I just loved it. It was fantastic. And at the same time, I started interning for an advertising agency. So, they paid me, but I was interning for an advertising agency, and I was the one who would work with them on creating their ads. So someone else would sell the ads. I would work with them on creating the ads for this publication. And what was so interesting about that job is when you're working with small companies, you're also doing a little bit of business consulting, helping them get their ad together. So you're like, who's your target market? What do you want to sell more of? What are you really good at? And so I would kind of pull these details out of them to help create a really fantastic ad. And so again, I'm using these same skills of entrepreneurship and understanding sales and marketing and target markets and your ideal customer avatar. We're going to talk a lot about that on this podcast, and really just honing in a message that helps bring money into a small business. So then I go to college, and actually my heart has always been for sales and marketing, but because I had built up so much experience working for almost 3 years for that advertising agency, I thought, you know what, I'm going to study finance because I felt like that was the thing that I wasn't as strong on. So I have a finance degree from Seattle University, and they also have business plan competitions there. And so I entered a business competition for a dog training company. So have always loved dogs, and I had been volunteering for a dog trainer. And as I was watching her teach, I thought, dog training is completely different than what people think it is. The way that we actually treat our dogs is almost the opposite of how we should be treating our dogs. We just have no education about that. And as I looked around, though, there was nobody that had franchised a dog training company. It was all very independent. It was like a lady somewhere who was also usually a little weird and socially awkward, because most dog trainers are, who was just kind of training dogs and had a car. Like that was her business. And so I thought, if we got some really well-trained dog trainers and then franchised it with beautiful logos and beautiful marketing and a beautiful space where not only did we do private dog training, but we also had classes, I think that would be a really great business. And so I wrote that business plan. And at the college level, you guys, you're competing, undergraduates compete with the MBA students. And I was going up against a lot of people who had .com business plans and, high-tech business plans. And then a lot of them actually were running those companies. Once you get to the college level and the MBA level, a lot of them submit business plans for companies they're actually running. So here I was, the youngest person in the competition with a dog training company, which everybody thought was so silly. But I wrote an incredible business plan, and I'm very good at sales and presentations. And so I just knocked it out of the park when I presented this, and my financials really made sense. I still think, by the way, there's room for someone to come have a national dog training franchise. And so I won that competition. I won a lot of money. And that is when I decided that I didn't really love finance. I had been doing an internship in corporate treasury just to see what that was like. And everybody there seemed really unhappy with their job. It's like, you guys don't seem happy, even though you make what I thought was really good money. And that's when I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a go of it as an entrepreneur. At that point, I had already seen, the writing on the wall that I was a little rebellious. I don't like being told what to do, and I like to make my own way. And I just loved entrepreneurship. And for those of you who are like that, you just know it's like a bug. Or it's like a disease. That's a terrible word, but like my husband's like, you just have that entrepreneurship disease. And I'm like, I know. I love it, right? And it's just who I am, and it's always been who I am. And so I just want to give comfort to you guys who feel like that, because there's some of us that were just born entrepreneurs, and it's always been with us, and it calls us, right? If you gave me like $10 million and I never had to work again, all I would do is start companies. That is all I would do. Like, that is what I would do with that money. And so I graduated from college. I actually started my dog training company, and I did fairly well. And I made pretty good money for a kid right out of school, and it was fun. I mean, I got to do my dream job, which was play with puppies all day. And I was at a very high price point. I was the most expensive dog trainer and boarder in Seattle. I had a very high-end clientele, a lot of lawyers and doctors and people who worked 12-hour shifts, and so they struggled taking care of their dogs, but they loved their dogs so much. And so I built a really nice business, but I was working every day. And people were often coming to my house every day. And so it just felt very invasive and exhausting. And I never got a day off. And I just realized that wasn't the business model I wanted. And at the same time, my mom was going through some difficult things personally. And so I ended up packing up my business and closing it. We were kind of at this critical point where we were either going to grow to a second location and have to invest a lot of money in that, or I was just going to close it. So I just decided to close it and go home and help my mom through some things that she was going through. And so I did that, and I started working for a high-end web design company in sales. I was selling high-end websites for a pretty schmancy company, and that was also where I got to use this same skill set where I would just be talking to small business owners and medium-sized business owners as well about, what their business did, how they make money, who their target market is, and really helping them come up with ways that they could say it that were interesting and that would draw people in and that would create more sales. Loved that job. It was super fun. And then I ended up meeting my husband. I left that job. I moved to the city that he lived in. And I thought that I would do something else. But we ended up getting pregnant on our honeymoon. And so here I was, a stay-at-home wife, which was very weird, by the way. It was weird that I had been doing all these things before, and now I'm just like in my living room with no job. We didn't really want me to get a temporary job. And I did look. I looked for some seasonal things, but nothing made sense. And so I just kind of hung out, growing a human in my body. And then I had little Rosemary, and that was amazing. I love being a mom. I knew I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I knew even before she was born that I wanted to try homeschooling. So it was very important to me when I met my husband that he knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom who tried homeschooling. I had never done it, so I didn't sell it that it was amazing. I said, look, I don't know, but I really want to try, and I want to be with someone who's going to let me try. So then I have this baby. We really struggled to breastfeed, so that was a really big part of the first 6 months of our journey. But I just remember staring at her in the living room, feeling so bored and being like, this sucks. I don't really like babies that much. And of course you love your own baby, but just like the things that babies do for me was just not very exciting. And I've met women who love babies and they're just like so into it. And that's a gift from God, right? And I don't have that gift. I have lots of other gifts, but I don't have this baby thing. And that just made me feel so conflicted. Like, oh, I'm here and I want to stay with her and I don't really want to put her in daycare, but I'm also just losing my mind and this is just so boring. And so I ended up getting into photography. I was like, oh, I want to take beautiful pictures of her. I didn't want to spend $700 on a photographer. And so I just started with like a point and shoot digital camera. And I watched some YouTube videos and really kind of upped my skill with this camera. And then I knew, though, that I needed another camera eventually. So I told my husband, I said, hey, I think I want to take pictures for people, but I need a better camera to build my skill set. So he bought me a DSLR. I don't even remember what the number was, from Costco, whatever the Costco special is. And I started taking pictures. And I was pretty good. I wasn't great because I was new, but I was taking, pictures that other people were saying, wow, that looks really good. But as I began to do this for free for some of my friends, I did a few newborn sessions and a few family sessions. I noticed that it was difficult to do with young kids. I couldn't actually bring my young kids with me. And I also noticed that it would be really helpful if I had help from another person, like an assistant to hold the light reflector, some things like that. I think editing pictures is a great thing to do as a stay-at-home mom because you can do it, at night when the kids are sleeping. But I couldn't quite dial in making this business work. I called it Sterling Rose Photography. So my favorite thing to do is to name companies, make logos, and build websites for them. So I did that and it was beautiful. But in the end, photography was not quite the right fit for me. So fast forward, I have 2 more kids. Okay, so yeah, those each came in 2 years. So Rose, Poppy, Violet, and Violet comes. And I spend I don't do very much the 3 months after I have a baby. I'm really focused on just trying to breastfeed. I struggle with that. My body doesn't make milk very well. And so I'm just working really hard on that. And so then it's about 3 months postpartum that I pop up and I'm like, now what? So after Violet, my third baby, I pop up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. And that's when I started Coffee and Pearls. And I wrote a book called The Catholic Mom Challenge. And what I had been doing this entire time was reading tons of business books. I love business books. I love self-help books, self-development books. And as I was reading them, I was noticing how much this business wisdom was applying to being a homemaker and a mom. And I thought, well, what a shame. I had this business training, and in business school, they kind of train you to read all of these books. And I thought, I bet there's all these moms out there who aren't reading these business books, like Good to Great, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, or, The Alter Ego Effect, or Atomic Habits. These are just some amazing books, The Infinite Game. And I thought, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read those books. I'm going to pull out a couple points that are really applicable to moms, and I'm going to do a podcast about that. So that's when Coffee and Pearls was born. And then I kind of took a bunch of the wisdom that I had learned and put it into the Catholic Mom Challenge, and I self-published that book. And I just decided I wanted to be an author and a speaker and a podcaster. And I put together a website, and I said, you can book me to speak at your conference. And a couple people did right away. It was so fun. And I knew I wanted to build something around that. I didn't really have a business plan around it because I wasn't sure how I would make money. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start by building this platform, and we'll see what happens. Which is one of the reasons why it was not more successful, by the way, because we'll see what happens isn't the best business plan. And the internet was still new at that point. And blogging was more popular, but I didn't want to be a blogger. I really wanted to be a podcaster. Writing is actually not one of my talents. My talent is more in public speaking and podcasting. And so I wanted to lean more on that. So I wanted to share some numbers with you guys. We're going to talk a lot about money on this podcast, and I'm going to help you not feel uncomfortable about that. It's going to be one of the big things that we do here is getting comfortable talking about money, making money, investing money, and not being scared of money. Okay? Because a lot of religious people have some kind of mixed ideas about money, and they feel nervous about it. And so what they end up doing is putting their head in the sand about it and not managing their money well, which is actually the opposite of what God tells us to do. So Coffee and Pearls, self-published my book. I did go on to self-publish 3 other books, and kept that podcast, kept public speaking. I also made a planner, a goals planner. I worked with a local printer. I invested $9,000 to print. I don't remember how many we printed. And I think I barely broke even on that, so I'll share that story later. But as I share these numbers with you, that's how I was making my money. I was making my money by people hiring me to do public speaking, book sales, which there's not a ton of money in that. And I never did any ads on my podcast or my website. I really didn't want to do that, so I never pursued that. And then I sold those planners. So those were kind of the streams of income that I had. So in 2016, when I started Coffee and Pearls and launched that book, I made $1,900. Now, that was just for the last half of the year, so it wasn't a full year. And these were numbers that I got off my taxes. So in 2017, I did a little over $5,000 in sales, but my net income after expenses, so after I paid for my website and all of those things, was $820. So $5,000 for the year, and we would say I took home $800. Then the next year, I did $5,000 again, but my take home was $1,600. So that was a little bit better. But again, I want to point out, nobody's retiring off this money. This is fun money. This isn't even, I'm mostly just paying for my own job. And I enjoyed my job. And I enjoyed getting to buy like a beautiful microphone or whatever it was that I was buying to kind of support my business. It was fun and I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a huge income source for my family. I wanted it to be, but I just, at that point, hadn't figured out how to do it in this way, being a stay-at-home mom and running an online business. And then in 2019, I made $14,800, so almost $15,000. So that was, 3 times what I'd done in the previous 2 years. And then in 2020, I did $26,000 in sales, but this is when things really changed because I did $14,000 of that in the last quarter, the last 3 months of the year. So I did $12,000 for 9 months. Then I did $14,000 in 3 months. And that is, I'm going to talk a lot about that on this podcast. That is when I discovered life coaching and how your thoughts create your results. And I realized that my thinking was keeping me stuck and keeping me playing small and keeping me not making a lot of money. And as soon as I cleaned out that thinking, I started making a lot of money. And as I'm recording this in September of 2021, my company has done a little over $90,000 of sales, and we will probably do $200,000 of sales for the year. So I'll share that at the end of the year, but I think we're on track to do that. And so radically different amount of money, right? To go from 2,000, 5,000, 5,000, we'll just round up to 15,000. And then, this mixed year of $26,000, and then boom, we're probably going to do $200,000 this year. And my husband and I have decided that, I'm going to make the majority of the money for our family. We've really shifted our lifestyle around that. And he is also a life coach, but he is growing his business more slowly, and his plan is to spend, more time doing house things and, taking the kids camping. And so we really kind of decided that I'm going to bring in the bulk of our income for our family. And that is who this podcast is for, right? This podcast is for Catholic women who want to make enough money to support their family, whether their husband chooses to leave his job or not, or retire, or come work with you, or do his own thing. We're here to make enough money to support the entire family, right? At least 6 figures, and hopefully multiple 6 figures, so that, we are the ones that are creating financial freedom for our family. And one of the big drivers of this for my family was we wanted to live in Sandpoint, Idaho, where there aren't a lot of jobs. So we knew that we had to create a job that we could do from anywhere. And so we wanted to create an online company so we could live in this very special place that we wanted to live. And that is why we pursued life coaching. So what I ended up doing, I guess I skipped over this. I ended up closing Coffee and Pearls. I started an interim company. I will share that story later, because I basically started a company and then closed it and ended up starting Made for Greatness with my business partner. And the Holy Spirit just led me through all of that. And that's why I was able to have the courage to just say, hey, you guys, this thing I just said I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it. It's going to look different. But God was just with me that whole time. The other thing that this podcast is going to be about is how to run a company with the Holy Spirit as your CEO, right? The only reason to start a business is because God wants you to start a business, period. There's no other reason to do it, right? We want to be walking closely with the Lord. We want to be listening to his voice. And it doesn't mean he tells us everything. He's not like, hey, I think now is a good time to start running Facebook ads. He doesn't give us that, right? But if he wants you to be in business, you're going to feel that tugging in your heart. You're going to wake up thinking about business. And if he wants you to make enough money to support your family, he's going to give you peace about that. And so the big shift that I had was I dropped the working mom guilt story. I dropped the I don't want to make tons of money story. I also dropped a story about not being good enough. I think all of us have imposter syndrome, where we think, who am I to start this business? Who am I to tell people how to manage their minds? We almost think we have to live perfect lives in order to have business that help people, but it's just not true. And I find that the more transparent I am about the ways that I struggle, the more helpful I actually am to women who are on this journey of building, 6 and 7 figure businesses. So that is just kind of a snapshot of who I am. I now run Made for Greatness with Larissa Horn. We have a monthly membership for Catholic moms where we teach them life coaching tools. And then I also do one-on-one business coaching for women who want to create financial freedom for their families, right? Who really want to be making at least 6 figures for their family so they can have freedom to live the lifestyle that they want. That's what I do now. It's so fun. And I'm going to be sharing not only practical tips, but also the mindset shifts that you need to have if you want to build a business like that. If God is calling you to build a big business, a successful business, I'm going to show you how to do it without compromising your life at home, right? I have 6 kids now. I homeschool them, and we have a beautiful life. I'm very present with them. I'm very present with my work. I have a lot of downtime. I am not very busy and I'm not very stressed. I'm going to teach you how to do that on this podcast. So thank you for joining me for this very first episode of the Made for Business podcast. You can also find it on our Made for Greatness YouTube channel. If you want to watch me, I'm not looking at the camera the whole time. I'm mostly just here recording this podcast, but I know some of you love video as a format, so that is available to you. And so if you want to learn more about me and my work, you can come check out madeforgreatness.co. And specifically, if you want to learn more about business, click business and let's do some business together. All right, ladies, I'm praying for you. Have a blessed day.